The music academy was buzzing with activity that morning. The halls echoed with the sound of footsteps, laughter, and the occasional clatter of piano keys from practice rooms. Teachers moved from one classroom to another, checking on students, giving advice, and occasionally correcting a hand position or posture. Students hurried past carrying sheet music notebooks and instrument cases. Some were rehearsing solos, some practicing scales, and some nervously preparing for upcoming recitals. It was an ordinary day at the academy, filled with the usual mix of stress, excitement, and hope. Amid this familiar scene, a woman quietly entered through the main door. She carried a small bag, wore a simple dress, and moved with a calm, unassuming grace. She did not rush or draw attention to herself. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her eyes held a quiet focus like someone who had come with a purpose but did not need anyone's recognition. Teachers glanced at her briefly and assumed she was a visitor or perhaps a new student. No one paid her much attention at first because she seemed so ordinary compared to the usual crowd of ambitious young musicians. She walked slowly down the hallway, taking in the surroundings with soft curiosity. The portraits of famous composers on the walls caught her eye. She paused for a moment, letting her hand brush over the frame of a piano master's painting. It was clear she appreciated the history and artistry of the place. There was no rush, no need to prove herself. She seemed content to simply be there, among the music and the people who shared her passion. As she moved closer to the practice rooms, she noticed a group of students struggling with a particularly difficult piano piece. The teachers were offering advice, but their expressions showed frustration. One student missed a note, and another struggled to keep the tempo. The woman stopped for a moment, quietly observing. She did not speak, but her eyes followed every hand movement, every change in rhythm, with an intensity that went unnoticed by the teachers. She seemed to understand the challenge without needing to say a word. A friendly teacher noticed her standing nearby and smiled politely. "Are you here for a lesson?" the teacher asked. The woman shook her head gently. "Just listening," she replied in a soft, calm voice. Her words were simple, yet there was a depth in her tone that made the teacher pause for a second. He nodded, not quite sure what to make of her. "All right, feel free to watch," he said, returning his attention to the students. The woman found a seat near the piano at the edge of the room. She sat down quietly, placing her bag beside her and opening a small notebook she had brought along. Occasionally, she jotted something down, perhaps notes, perhaps observations. She did not interfere or offer suggestions. She was invisible to most, blending into the background while carefully watching the struggling students. As the lesson continued, whispers among the students reached her ears. "Who is she?" one asked. "I think she's just a visitor," another replied. "She doesn't look like she belongs here," a third added. The woman heard none of this. She was focused entirely on the music, on the rhythm, the notes, and the subtle mistakes the students made. She could tell where they hesitated, where they faltered, and where they missed the emotion of the piece. Her face remained calm, almost serene, as if she had all the time in the world and nothing in the world could disturb her focus. The teachers continued their critique, unaware of the woman's presence as anything more than a quiet observer. One teacher sighed and rubbed his temples. "This piece is very difficult," he said. "I don't know if they will ever get it right." Another teacher nodded in agreement, tapping a pencil against the desk. The woman listened, her eyes never leaving the piano keys. She seemed to understand not just the difficulty of the music, but the emotions behind it, the subtle feelings that a great pianist needed to express. Time passed quietly. Students tried again, played through mistakes, and corrected their tempo. The woman's calm presence remained constant. She did not clap, she did not comment, she did not show surprise or judgment. She simply watched, taking in every sound, every movement. It was as if the room itself became quieter around her, the noise of frustration and nerves fading in her presence. Even without touching the piano, she seemed to hold the attention of the music in a delicate balance, as though she understood it in a way others had yet to see. Eventually, one of the teachers noticed her again. He had been moving around the room, giving instructions when he realized she had been sitting there, silent and composed, for a long time. He paused for a moment, observing her carefully. There was something different about her, something that did not match the ordinary appearance he had assumed. Her calmness, her attentiveness, and the way she seemed to understand the music without a word made him curious. He wondered quietly, Could she actually play? The woman sensed his glance but did not react. She remained seated, notebook open, pencil in hand, her eyes occasionally following a student's fingers on the keys. She did not boast. She did not show off, and she did not make any effort to draw attention. Yet there was a subtle confidence in her posture, a quiet strength in the way she observed. It was the kind of confidence that only comes from years of practice, dedication, and love for what one does. As the lesson drew to a close, students packed up their sheet music and instruments. They chatted quietly about their struggles and victories, laughing nervously about mistakes they had made. The woman stood slowly, gathering her bag and notebook. She made no effort to speak to the teachers or students. She simply nodded politely to the room, acknowledging the effort and energy of everyone there. Her presence had been quiet but noticeable, a shadow of calm in the midst of chaos. Before leaving, she paused at the piano one last time. Her fingers hovered above the keys, just lightly touching them in a gesture of respect, almost like a silent greeting to the instrument that had witnessed so much today. Then she stepped back and moved toward the door, leaving the room with the same quiet grace with which she had entered. The teachers and students watched her go, still unaware of the depth of talent that rested within this unassuming woman. That morning at the academy ended much as it had begun, with students leaving, teachers cleaning up, and the halls returning to their usual quiet hum. But for those who had noticed the modest woman, a subtle curiosity lingered. Who was she? Why had she been so quiet? And most importantly, what could she do if she ever sat down at the piano herself? No one knew yet that the woman who had walked through their doors so unassumingly was not just another visitor. She was a musician of rare skill, someone who could make the piano sing in ways that few could imagine. For now, she remained a quiet presence, blending into the everyday rhythm of the academy, leaving only a hint of mystery behind her. But that quiet day was about to change everything, and the academy would soon discover the extraordinary talent hidden behind her modest appearance. The next day, the music academy was alive with activity once again. Students were moving quickly between rooms. Teachers were giving instructions, and the air was filled with the familiar mix of nervous energy and excitement. The modest woman returned, walking through the same door she had entered the day before. She carried her small bag and notebook, her presence calm and unassuming. Once again, few noticed her among the bustling students and busy teachers. She seemed content to remain quiet, observing from the sidelines, letting the music and the environment speak for themselves. That morning, the teachers were gathered around a piano in one of the main practice rooms. They were preparing a particularly challenging piece, one that had been giving even the most talented students trouble. The piece was fast, full of complex rhythms, sudden changes in tempo, and intricate finger movements. Several students had tried it in recent weeks, and the teachers were growing frustrated at the repeated mistakes. One teacher, clearly exasperated, sighed and shook his head. "I don't know if anyone will get it right today," he said. "It's too difficult for most of them." As the students continued to fumble through the music, the modest woman quietly entered the room and took a seat at the back. She did not speak or draw attention to herself. Her eyes followed every movement of the students' hands on the piano, noting where they hesitated, where their fingers stumbled, and where the music lost its emotional depth. She remained completely still, as if the chaos of the room had no effect on her calm demeanor. The teachers noticed her sitting quietly and assumed she was just observing again. After several failed attempts, one of the teachers, feeling frustrated but a little playful, turned toward the woman. "Why don't you give it a try?" he said, a hint of a challenge in his voice. The teachers expected her to politely decline, assuming she was inexperienced or not serious about playing. Some students laughed quietly, thinking it would be amusing to see someone so ordinary try such a difficult piece. They whispered to each other, curious but not expecting anything extraordinary. The woman looked up at the teacher and shook her head slightly, her expression modest and calm. "I can try," she said softly. Her voice was quiet but steady, with no hint of arrogance or pretense. The teachers exchanged surprised glances. One whispered to another, "She's serious?" The other shrugged, unsure. The students leaned forward in curiosity, some smirking, some genuinely interested, wondering how a quiet woman with no apparent training could attempt such a challenging piece. She moved toward the piano slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried. When she reached the keys, she paused for a moment, her hands hovering above them. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes briefly, as if connecting with the music in a way that was invisible to everyone else. The room fell into a hush. Even the students who had been whispering and laughing moments before seemed to sense that something was about to happen. Then she began to play. From the very first note, the room fell completely silent. Her fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace, effortlessly executing the intricate rhythms and rapid movements of the difficult piece. The notes flowed smoothly, perfectly timed, with every subtle shift in tempo captured beautifully. It was as if the music itself had come alive under her touch. The teachers stared in disbelief, unable to believe what they were hearing. Even the most confident students froze, watching her hands move as if by magic. Her performance was more than just technically perfect. It was filled with emotion. Every note seemed to tell a story, every chord conveyed a feeling. The teachers, who had expected a simple demonstration at best, were now completely absorbed in the music. They had never heard the piece played with such skill, depth, and passion. The students, who had struggled for weeks to even get through parts of it, were wide-eyed with amazement. Some covered their mouths in shock, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Minutes passed like seconds. The woman did not rush, and she did not hesitate. Her entire focus was on the piano, on the music, and on expressing every nuance with care and precision. The teachers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. They realized that the quiet, modest woman sitting at the back of the room yesterday was not just an observer. She was a musician of extraordinary talent. No one had expected this. When she reached the final notes of the piece, the last sounds hung in the air like a delicate echo. The room remained silent for a moment, as if everyone needed time to process what they had just heard. Then slowly the teachers began to clap, their applause growing louder as they expressed their astonishment. The students followed, some cheering, some simply staring in amazement. The woman, however, remained calm. She did not turn to acknowledge the applause immediately. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, letting the final notes settle in her mind, before standing quietly. One of the teachers stepped forward, still clapping, and asked, "Where did you learn to play like that? How long have you been practicing?" The woman smiled gently, her humility evident in her soft response. "I've studied music for many years," she said quietly, "mostly on my own with a few private teachers. I've always loved the piano, and I enjoy playing." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience and dedication. The teachers were stunned. They had assumed she was a casual observer, someone who might have tried the piece and failed. Instead, they had just witnessed a performance that rivaled even the most talented students in the academy. One teacher shook his head in disbelief. "I never would have guessed," he admitted. "You make it look so easy." The woman only smiled, modest and calm, as if the idea of impressing anyone had never been her goal. Students crowded around, asking questions and expressing their admiration. They wanted to know how she had learned such a difficult piece, how she could play with such emotion, and what inspired her. She answered patiently, speaking with simple words and a warm smile, never boasting, never drawing attention to herself. Her humility only made the students respect her more, realizing that someone so talented could remain so grounded and kind. By the end of the day, the room was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread quickly through the academy about the unexpected performance. Teachers who had once been frustrated with their students' progress were now inspired. Students who had doubted themselves felt a renewed determination to improve. And the modest woman who had entered quietly and unassumingly had become the center of attention. Not because she sought it, but because her talent could not be ignored. Despite all the attention, she remained humble. She did not seek praise or recognition. She packed her notebook and bag carefully, thanked the teachers politely, and prepared to leave the room. As she walked toward the door, she cast one last glance at the piano. It was as if she had shared a private conversation with it, and now it was time to step away. The teachers and students watched her go, still in awe, realizing that they had witnessed something rare and extraordinary that morning. That day marked the beginning of a new chapter at the academy. The modest woman's talent had not only surprised everyone, but had also changed the atmosphere of the place. The teachers now looked at students differently, inspired to push their boundaries. The students, in turn, felt encouraged to work harder, knowing that true dedication and skill could emerge from the most unexpected places. And the woman herself remained as calm and humble as ever, quietly carrying her love for music with her, unaware of the ripple of excitement she had caused, but quietly shaping the lives of everyone she had touched. The news of the woman's extraordinary performance spread quickly through the academy. By the next week, the teachers were still talking about it, unable to forget what they had witnessed. Even the students who had been present that day replayed the performance in their minds, whispering to each other about the grace, precision, and emotion in every note she had played. Her calm and modest presence had left a mark on everyone. But what no one had yet realized was that the real surprise was about to come. One morning, as the students gathered for a regular practice session, the head teacher entered the main hall with an unusual sense of excitement. He called out to the staff and students, asking them to pay attention for a moment. "We have a special opportunity today," he announced. "Our quiet observer from last week has agreed to play for us again, but this time in front of the entire academy." There was a stir among the students, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Whispers spread quickly. "She's going to play for everyone?" one student asked. "Yes," another replied. "I can't wait to see what she does this time." The modest woman arrived quietly as usual, carrying her small bag and notebook. She nodded politely to the teachers and students who now recognized her, and moved toward the piano in the center of the hall. The room was filled with students, teachers, and staff, all curious and slightly nervous to see what she could do in front of a larger audience. She did not show any sign of nervousness herself. Her calm demeanor remained, her eyes focused, her movements deliberate and precise. She seemed perfectly at ease, as if the piano and the music were old friends welcoming her. The head teacher approached her and said, "This piece is very difficult. We know you have the skill, but the pressure is higher today with so many people listening. Are you ready?" She smiled softly, almost shyly, and nodded. "I will try my best," she said, her voice quiet but steady. The simplicity of her words made the audience lean in, as if to catch every sound she would make. The room, once filled with chatter and movement, became still. Everyone watched her sit at the piano, her hands hovering just above the keys, ready to bring the music to life. When she began to play, the hall fell into a silence that felt almost sacred. Her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, precise and controlled, yet full of emotion and depth. The difficult piece flowed naturally from her hands, each note perfectly timed, each chord expressing feelings that touched the hearts of everyone in the room. Even the teachers, who had been impressed before, were now completely captivated. They exchanged glances, astonished at the level of skill and artistry they were witnessing. As she played, the students watched in awe. Some sat forward in their seats, unable to believe what they were seeing. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling the story and emotions conveyed through the piano. Every note seemed to tell a tale of struggle, passion, and beauty, and the way she moved her hands made it clear she was fully immersed in the music. It was not just a technical performance. It was an expression of life, of emotion, of something deeper than anyone could have expected. The woman's modesty and calm presence only amplified the impact of her performance. She did not appear to be performing for applause or recognition. She seemed entirely focused on the music itself, letting it guide her fingers, her body, and her expression. The audience was spellbound, unable to look away. The complexity of the piece, which had troubled so many students before, seemed effortless in her hands. Every twist, every rapid sequence of notes was executed perfectly. The room was filled not just with sound, but with emotion, and everyone felt it deeply. Teachers whispered to each other, unable to hide their amazement. "How is this possible?" one asked quietly. "She makes it look so simple," another replied. They had studied music for decades, trained countless students, and yet they had never seen anyone play with such control, emotion, and clarity. Students were equally mesmerized. Some of them had practiced this piece for months without success, and now they realized the level of mastery required to truly bring it to life. They could hardly imagine ever reaching that skill, but they were inspired, motivated by her example. Halfway through the performance, the woman shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers moving faster, more delicately, yet still perfectly controlled. The audience could hear every nuance, every subtle change in tone, and it made the music even more powerful. She was telling a story without words, and the listeners felt every emotion as if they were living it themselves. Some students felt tears welling up in their eyes, moved by the beauty and intensity of her playing. The teachers, usually reserved and composed, were now completely captivated, unable to resist being drawn into the music. As the final section approached, the energy in the room intensified. Her fingers danced across the keys with elegance and precision, bringing the piece to its dramatic climax. Every note resonated, every chord rang clearly, and the audience was holding its breath, waiting for the last sounds to settle. When the final note finally echoed through the hall, there was a pause so long and profound that it felt like time itself had stopped. Then slowly the applause began, first softly, then growing louder and stronger until the room was filled with cheers, clapping, and exclamations of amazement. Even with all the attention, the woman remained calm. She stood slowly, nodded politely to the audience, and smiled gently. Her modesty was evident in every gesture. She did not bask in the applause or seek personal recognition. Instead, she let the music itself take the credit, as if it had always been the real performer and she was merely its messenger. The teachers, students, and staff were completely enthralled, some clapping until their hands ached, others simply staring, trying to absorb the incredible experience they had just witnessed. One of the teachers, still catching his breath from the performance, stepped forward and asked her, "How have you practiced for so many years without anyone noticing? How did you develop such skill and control?" She smiled softly, almost shyly, and replied, "I have always loved music. I have studied quietly, mostly on my own, and I have practiced whenever I could. Music is something I enjoy deeply, and I never felt the need to show it to others until now." Her words, simple and honest, made the audience admire her even more. It was not just her skill but her humility that touched everyone's hearts. Students began asking questions, eager to learn from her experience. How had she managed such difficult pieces? What inspired her to continue practicing despite obstacles? How did she maintain her calm under pressure? She answered each question patiently, sharing advice about practice, focus, and dedication. Her voice was gentle, her tone sincere, and she never gave the impression of being above anyone. She treated every student with respect and encouragement, making them feel seen and valued despite the vast difference in skill. By the end of the session, the hall was filled with excitement and inspiration. The teachers discussed how they could incorporate her approach into lessons, and the students were motivated to work harder than ever before. They realized that true talent often came with years of quiet, dedicated practice, and that humility and focus were just as important as skill. The modest woman had not only performed an extraordinary piece of music, but had also left a lasting impression on everyone present, shaping their attitudes toward practice, dedication, and passion for music. When she finally left the hall, carrying her small bag and notebook, the audience remained in awe. They knew they had witnessed something rare and beautiful. Her calm, modest presence had hidden an incredible talent, and now everyone understood that true mastery often comes quietly, without fanfare, waiting for the right moment to shine. The day would be remembered at the Academy for years to come, not just for the music itself, but for the lesson in humility, dedication, and the power of quietly extraordinary talent. The following days at the Academy were filled with a mixture of awe and curiosity. The teachers could not stop talking about the woman's extraordinary performance, and the students were buzzing with excitement and questions. It was clear that something remarkable had happened, something that had changed the atmosphere of the entire Academy. The modest woman, meanwhile, continued to attend quietly, as if nothing had changed. She carried her small bag and notebook, greeted everyone politely, and remained focused on the music. She did not seek attention, and yet she had become the center of everyone's admiration. One morning, a group of teachers gathered to discuss her presence. They were fascinated not just by her skill, but by her humility. "We need to understand her approach," one teacher said. "She has a technique and depth that few of our students have ever reached. How does someone become so skilled without seeking recognition?" Another teacher nodded. "And the emotion in her playing, it's beyond technical skill. She makes the piano speak like it has a life of its own." The teachers decided that they needed to speak with her directly, to learn more about her background and experience. Later that day, one of the head teachers approached her during a break between practice sessions. "Would you mind talking with us for a few minutes?" he asked politely. She smiled softly and nodded. "Of course," she replied, her voice calm and warm. The teachers led her to a quiet room, away from the busy halls and echoing pianos, so they could ask their questions without distractions. She sat down, her posture relaxed but attentive, ready to share her story without any pretense or showmanship. The conversation began slowly. The teachers asked her about her musical training and background. She explained that she had started playing the piano at a very young age, learning from whoever was willing to teach her in small local settings. She spoke of years of private practice, of learning from recordings from sheet music and from observing other musicians whenever she could. She had never sought fame or public recognition, instead focusing on the joy of playing and the deep connection she felt with music. Her voice was soft, but every word carried sincerity and depth. The teachers listened intently, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. They were amazed by the combination of dedication and modesty she exhibited. "You have studied for decades in private, and yet you perform as if the piano itself is speaking through you," one teacher said. She smiled, shaking her head slightly. "I think the piano teaches you more than any teacher ever could," she replied. "When you spend enough time listening and practicing, you begin to understand the emotion behind the notes. That is what matters most." As the conversation continued, it became clear that her approach to music was deeply human-centric. She focused not on perfection alone, but on expressing feelings and stories through the piano. She spoke about the joy of discovering new harmonies, the satisfaction of mastering a difficult passage, and the quiet happiness that came from connecting with music on a personal level. The teachers realized that this perspective was rare. Many musicians focused solely on technical skill or recognition, but she had cultivated something far more profound, a love for music itself and the ability to communicate it to others. Meanwhile, students who had been listening to her performances began approaching her with questions about technique and practice. She welcomed them warmly, sitting with each one and demonstrating gently, explaining how she approached challenging sections of music and how she managed to convey emotion through dynamics, tempo, and phrasing. Her patience was remarkable. She never expressed frustration or judgment, no matter how many times a student struggled with a passage. Her focus was always on helping others understand, rather than showing off her own skill. In one instance, a young student struggled with a particularly fast and difficult passage in a Chopin study. The student's hands trembled, and frustration was evident on their face. The modest woman moved quietly beside the piano and gently suggested a different approach. She demonstrated slowly, letting the student watch her fingers carefully. Then she encouraged the student to try again, guiding them through each movement patiently. After several attempts, the student managed to play the passage correctly for the first time. Their eyes widened in disbelief, and a smile of triumph spread across their face. The woman nodded warmly. "See, you had it all along," she said simply. The joy in the room was palpable, and the other students watched in quiet admiration. The teachers were equally impressed. They observed how her guidance went beyond technical instruction. She taught students how to feel the music, how to listen to the emotion behind each note, and how to play in a way that conveyed meaning rather than just hitting the right keys. They began to realize that her performances were so powerful, not just because of her skill, but because of her understanding of music as a living, breathing form of expression. This was a lesson they could bring back to their own students, and it transformed their approach to teaching. As the days passed, her presence began to change the culture of the academy. Students became more attentive, more patient with themselves and with each other. They realized that mastery did not come overnight, and that it was not enough to simply play the notes correctly. Music required emotion, focus, and a willingness to understand the story behind every piece. The teachers encouraged this mindset, inspired by the woman's example. Her quiet influence rippled outward, affecting everyone in the academy. The woman herself remained humble throughout all the attention. She continued to arrive quietly, practice diligently, and assist students without seeking recognition. She occasionally performed in small sessions for the teachers and students, always with the same calm focus and expressive emotion that had first astonished the academy. Each performance seemed to reveal something new, not just about the music itself, but about the performer's understanding of life. Dedication and humility. One afternoon, the head teacher invited her to perform in front of a larger audience of students, parents, and staff. She agreed, though her demeanor remained modest and unassuming. When she sat at the piano and began to play, the room was immediately captivated. Her fingers moved with astonishing precision, yet the emotion behind every note resonated even more deeply than before. Parents and staff who had never visited the academy before were left speechless. They could feel the story in the music, the dedication behind every movement, and the quiet strength of a musician who had mastered both skill and heart. After the performance, the audience erupted in applause, yet the woman simply stood, nodded politely and smiled softly. She did not bow excessively or seek special recognition. Her focus was on the music itself and the impact it had on those listening. Teachers and students alike were inspired not only by her technical brilliance, but by her humility, her dedication, and her ability to elevate the hearts of everyone around her. In the weeks that followed, more students sought her guidance. She agreed to teach small group lessons, helping each student discover their own strengths and encouraging them to approach music with passion and patience. Her teaching style was gentle yet effective, blending technical instruction with a focus on emotional expression. The academy had never experienced anything like it. Students began to improve rapidly, not just because of her skill, but because of the way she inspired them to connect with the music on a deeper level. Her story began to spread beyond the academy walls. Visitors came to hear her play, curious to witness the woman whose talent and humility had transformed an entire school of musicians. Yet she remained unchanged by the attention. She continued to arrive quietly each day, focusing on music and helping students grow. She never allowed fame or recognition to distract her from the joy she found in playing the piano and sharing her knowledge with others. Through her presence, the academy learned a valuable lesson. True mastery is not about showing off skill or seeking recognition. It is about dedication, humility, and the ability to inspire others through quiet excellence. The woman's story became a living example of this truth. Teachers adapted their methods, students improved in ways they had never imagined, and the entire academy experienced a transformation. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that the modest woman had done more than perform incredible music. She had revealed the power of humility, patience, and dedication. She had shown that extraordinary talent could remain hidden for years, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And she had taught the teachers and students that true brilliance is not measured by recognition alone, but by the ability to touch the hearts of others and inspire them to grow. Her presence had changed the academy forever, leaving a mark that would be remembered for generations. The academy had settled into a rhythm after weeks of excitement, but the quiet presence of the modest woman continued to influence everyone. Students practiced with more care, teachers approached lessons with a renewed sense of purpose, and the atmosphere in the hallways was filled with curiosity and respect. Even those who had never spoken to her before were watching closely, learning silently from the way she carried herself, how she treated the piano, and the calm, focused energy she brought to every room. One morning, the head teacher approached her with a proposal. "We would like you to perform at the end-of-term recital," he said. "Not just for the teachers and students, but for everyone who attends, the parents, the staff, and visitors. It will be a chance for everyone to see your gift." The woman paused, considering his words carefully. She was not someone who sought attention, and the idea of performing in front of such a large audience made her slightly uneasy. Yet after a moment she nodded. "If it helps inspire the students, I will play," she replied gently. Her words were simple, yet there was an unmistakable sincerity in them. As the recital day approached, anticipation in the academy grew. Students whispered among themselves, wondering what she would play, how she would perform, and whether she would reveal even more of her extraordinary talent. Teachers who had worked with her were equally excited, knowing that her performance would not only showcase her skill, but also teach a powerful lesson about dedication, humility, and the meaning of true artistry. Everyone agreed that this recital would be unlike any other in the academy's history. The day of the recital arrived, and the main hall was filled with people. Parents, students, teachers, and visitors found their seats, chatting softly in anticipation. The modest woman arrived quietly as usual, carrying her small bag. She wore a simple outfit, blending into the crowd, yet when she approached the piano at the front of the hall, there was an immediate shift in energy. The chatter faded, and the audience's attention focused entirely on her. There was no sense of expectation for showmanship, only a quiet curiosity and respect. She took a deep breath and sat at the piano. Her hands hovered above the keys for a brief moment, a gesture almost of greeting to the instrument that had been her lifelong companion. Then slowly she began to play. From the first note, the audience was captivated. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, effortlessly navigating the complex melodies of the chosen piece. Every note was filled with emotion, every pause intentional, every chord a reflection of the depth of her understanding and love for music. The difficult passages, which had challenged even the most talented students, flowed seamlessly under her touch. As she played, it became clear that this performance was more than a demonstration of technical skill. The music told a story, one of patience, dedication, and quiet perseverance. Parents, some of whom had never experienced such profound piano playing, were moved to tears. Teachers exchanged astonished glances, recognizing the mastery and emotion in every movement. Students leaned forward, absorbing every detail, taking mental notes on technique, expression, and the dedication required to achieve such a level of artistry. Midway through the piece, the woman shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers dancing across the keys with a fluidity that seemed almost impossible. The complexity of the music, the speed, and the subtle shifts in tone were all handled effortlessly, yet there was a human touch to every note. The audience could feel her emotion, her connection to the music, and the years of dedication that had brought her to this moment. It was clear that she had not only mastered the mechanics of the piano, but had also learned to speak through it, to communicate without words, to touch hearts directly. The hall was silent except for the sound of the piano. Every listener felt as if the music was speaking just to them, telling a story that words could never capture. The teachers, who had always prided themselves on understanding music at a deep level, were humbled. They realized that the woman had achieved something they had rarely witnessed, a perfect harmony of technical mastery and emotional depth. Students felt inspired in a way that went beyond learning technique. They wanted to connect with music the way she did, to practice with dedication, to feel every note as she did. When the final chord echoed through the hall, there was a pause so profound that no one moved or spoke for a moment. The audience was still, letting the last vibrations of the piano settle in their minds and hearts. Then slowly applause began. It started softly, tentative, as if people were testing whether the moment was real, but it grew rapidly until the hall was filled with cheers, clapping, and expressions of amazement. Teachers and students alike stood, applauding vigorously, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The modest woman, however, did not appear overwhelmed. She simply closed the piano lid gently, stood, and gave a small nod of acknowledgement, her calm smile conveying gratitude without ego. After the performance, the head teacher approached her with visible admiration. "I cannot express how much this has inspired everyone," he said. "You have not only shown incredible skill but also taught us all what it means to truly connect with music." She smiled and replied softly, "Music is about sharing feelings. If I can inspire even a few students to love it as deeply as I do, that is enough for me." Her humility was as striking as her talent, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. Students approached her eagerly, asking questions about her techniques, her practice routines, and how she managed to play with such emotion. She answered each question patiently, demonstrating passages on the piano, explaining her thought process and emphasizing the importance of dedication, patience, and love for the music. Every answer was thoughtful and encouraging, never condescending, and it left the students feeling inspired and capable of achieving more than they had imagined. Teachers began to incorporate what they had learned from her into their lessons. They encouraged students to focus not just on hitting the right notes but on expressing themselves, connecting emotionally with the music, and practicing consistently with patience and care. The modest woman's influence spread throughout the academy, changing the way both students and teachers approached music. Her impact was not limited to her performances. It extended into the very culture of the academy, fostering an environment of growth, inspiration, and appreciation for the true art of music. In the weeks that followed, more opportunities arose for her to share her gift. She conducted small workshops, guided students individually, and occasionally performed in front of the academy. Each time she remained as humble as ever, never seeking praise but always inspiring those around her. Word of her talent continued to spread quietly, and people from outside the academy came to witness her performances, eager to experience the depth and emotion she brought to every piece of music. Yet, despite the growing recognition, she remained unchanged. Her focus was always on the music, on helping students, and on nurturing the love of music in others. She never allowed fame or attention to distract her from her passion. She understood that true artistry was not measured by applause but by the ability to touch hearts and inspire growth in others. Her story became a lesson for everyone at the Academy. That quiet dedication, humility, and love for one's craft could achieve greatness far beyond what fame or recognition could offer. The Academy flourished in the months that followed. Students practiced with renewed determination, inspired by her example. Teachers approached their lessons with more patience and creativity, understanding that guiding students was as much about nurturing emotion and passion as it was about technical skill. And the modest woman continued to arrive quietly, play beautifully, and teach with kindness and patience, leaving a lasting impression on everyone she encountered. By the end of the school year, it was clear that her influence had changed the Academy forever. The culture of music had shifted from a focus solely on technical excellence to an appreciation for emotional depth, dedication, and the joy of expression. Students felt empowered, teachers felt inspired, and the Academy had become a place where true artistry could thrive. And at the heart of it all was the quiet, modest woman whose extraordinary talent had emerged not to seek recognition, but to inspire and elevate everyone around her. Her story was remembered not just for the technical brilliance she displayed, but for the lessons she imparted about humility, dedication, and the true meaning of art. She showed that greatness could be found in quiet places, in unassuming individuals, and that true talent shines brightest not through showmanship but through patience, passion, and the power to touch the hearts of others. The Academy would never forget her, and the students and teachers would carry her lessons with them for the rest of their lives, inspired to pursue music not just with skill, but with love, humility, and purpose. The modest woman had quietly transformed the lives of everyone she encountered. She had entered the Academy unnoticed, observed quietly, and then revealed a talent that surpassed all expectations. She had taught lessons far beyond music, lessons of humility, patience, dedication, and the quiet power of extraordinary skill. And as she left the Academy at the end of the year, carrying her small bag and notebook, she did so with the same grace and modesty with which she had arrived, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations of musicians to come.